There's a big jobs report number that dropped last Friday, almost 1 million new jobs created. That bested a lot of expectations. We wanted to bring in one of my favorite economic analysts, Professor Richard Wolff, to talk about all of that. He is host of Economic Update, professor of economics emeritus at UMass Amherst. He's visiting professor at the New School, founder of Democracy at Work, and many, many more things in addition to those. Great to see you, sir.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Of course. So just give us top line. What did you think of that jobs report and what it says about where we are in terms of the economic picture?
Well, I think my reactions were like most Americans. I was glad that there were people getting jobs because it's obviously better that people have jobs than that they don't, especially in this society, especially at this time. But the minute you look at what those numbers cover, that is, you look a little bit below the surface, you begin to see things that ought to make any reasonable person worry. And let me give you the single most important. A huge proportion of the improved job situation is public sector jobs, jobs working for the government, not for the private sector. If you look at private sector employment, the news from last month is anything but wonderful or exciting, because what it shows, and this is perhaps the key insight of these numbers, is that this is an economy more dependent on life support from the government than it has ever been. I mean, we live at a time where corporations are in debt to the government more than ever before, where the government is in debt to both other governments and corporations and people more than ever before, and where households are living on more debt than ever before. This creates an economy held up in the end by the Federal Reserve, kept alive by the government, which ironically the private sector likes to bash, but upon which that sector now depends.
That's fascinating, Professor. Do you fear inflation with all these various spending packages, or do you think the fears of inflation are overblown?
Well, you may be surprised. Yes, I'm worried about inflation, and yes, the fears of inflation are overblown. We shouldn't be upset at being able to answer those questions that way. But let me try to be clear about it. Inflation is a major economic event. It never has one cause or one key cause. Lots of things have to come together, and that has happened historically, and it can happen again to produce an inflation. And we are a society now so dependent on credit that we're flooding the economy with the money to sustain credit, and that money could move and become something chasing goods and services and produce an inflation. On the other hand, we have been pumping money into the economy for 10 years now. We've never stopped doing that since the so-called Great Recession of 2008 and 9. And we haven't had an inflation all those 10 years. So you can see other factors have to be at work. And mostly the people who yell inflation have something else in mind that they either want or don't want to happen. And the scary thing to threaten folks with is inflation. So it gets inflated, if you pardon the pun, but it is not, in fact, the kind of thing that you worry about every day. You have to see quite a few things coming together before you really think a sustained inflation is underway. And one last point. Nobody can predict the future. I can't, you can't, nobody can. And therefore, these arguments that are often couched as we will have inflation next year or we will not, don't take this stuff seriously. Those are wishful thinking at best.
So I want to dig in more on what you were saying about private sector job creation versus government job creation. We actually have a news article from NBC that laid this out. So in the midst of this, gigantic jobs number, they're pointing out, as you were, private companies added 330,000 jobs in July, and that was way below the estimate of 653,000. So where do things go from here? I mean, do those government jobs just continue to be created and prop up the job market? I'm also seeing these numbers about how there are record-breaking numbers of job openings right now. So there's, the idea there are plenty of work for people who want to go and find a job anywhere. Where do these things go from here as we pull back some of the pandemic supports that we've had in place for the past year?
Well, I couldn't really honestly answer where they're going to go without violating what I just told you about
predicting the future.
So let me tell you where some things are pointing, but without getting to the notion that I can tell you what's going to happen. We are a society that was unable to respond to the COVID disaster because fundamentally the powers of our economic system did not want the kind of lockdown, the kind of really closing up tight, no business as usual that was done in New Zealand, that was done in the People's Republic of China, and many, many other countries. We didn't want it. We did the minimum we felt we had to once we got overwhelmed by COVID. Then we were over quick in opening up again, and now we're confronting with the Delta variant a reason to worry that we may be closing down. One of the signs of the private sector not doing what was expected, as you just pointed out, was because more and more employers are discovering that there are high risks at this point when we don't know how bad this current surge of COVID cases is going to get. And we have something which I think in the long run is even more important. We have something close to, and I don't mean to use hyperbole, but I will. We have a real rethinking by the working class of the United States of what they're willing as a class to accept. Mm-hmm. Are they really willing? This COVID interruption of a year and a half has made people not only lose many jobs, but rethink their jobs. And it's made the employers do that. One of the things that many workers are discovering is the job they thought they were coming back to isn't that job. It's that job in an office where 5 people used to work, but the employer only brought back 4. Yeah, he's going to give them the same wage, but he's going to demand much more. And they know that kind of thing was already going underway, but the break has made it somehow questionable. The quit rate, the government statistics of people leaving their job, angry or bitter or disgusted and wanting to look for something better, is at a rate we've never seen before in American history. Workers are saying we are not ready to be forced into a life of a precarious job, a hit or miss job, cobbling together 2 or 3 jobs, what's becoming normal for the working class. They are now wondering in this country, and that is at the beginning, and that's shaking up kind of everything, and I suspect is going to shape what we see in the future to an even greater degree.
Professor, final question from me. I'm curious what you think of this new reconciliation package, and just to run through some of the stuff for the listeners. It has child tax benefit, universal pre-K, paid family and medical leave, tuition-free community college, lower prescription drug costs, housing, home care, major climate money, lower Medicare age, Obamacare expansion. The list goes on and on of the stuff that's in there. If this were to pass as is, which is a big if, but if it were to pass as is, would it be the biggest fundamental transformation of the American economy since the New Deal?
Yes, it would be since the New Deal. But that's the crucial caveat that you've given there. We are in a crisis that is much worse in ways I'll mention in a minute than the New Deal. But we're proposing something which is the best since the New Deal, but is modest compared to the New Deal if you understand the scope. In the New Deal, we fundamentally changed the economy. We created Social Security, unemployment compensation, the first minimum wage, a federal jobs program employing millions. That was a staggering transformation. Compared to that, this one, which is the biggest since then, is still relative to the economy modest. And that's the problem. because in the Great Depression, we didn't have simultaneously the worst public health disaster in the country's history. This time we do. We have the convergence of a breakdown of the economic system, capitalism, and of our public health system. And those two together mean that however dramatic Bernie Sanders is about this program, and he has every right to be, it is still not the fundamental change that many of us think this economy, having lived 100 years in this old way, now needs.
I think that is very well said, and that context is incredibly important. Professor, it's always great to have you. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. We appreciate you so much. Kyle and I will be back on Thursday. In the meantime, if you are able and if you like what we do, we would really love for you to sign up for a premium subscription. The link is below. It's $10 a month. You guys know the deal. You get the video an hour early. You get exclusive content that is not available to others, including long-form interviews with some of our favorite guests. So thank you guys so much. We love you. We'll see you back here on Thursday. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.